Oh, you don't have it? It's working. Is it too loud? Is it too loud? Yeah. Yeah, but you can't hear anything. Now. Okay, we got it. I'm gonna have to ask you to go be dismissed if you're not careful. Bless your heart, Ann. Now, are we somewhat moderated here? Okay. See what we've got up there. All right, let me get this thing adjusted. Let's see where I need to be on that slide. See what that one is. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. All right. Mark and I have been fussing over who's going to teach today. He finished up back, and I've been subbing, so I kind of got to this lesson, and this is one of my favorite lessons in the book of Revelation. So I told him that, we were trying to decide walking down the aisle a while ago, so I told him I'd try this Sunday, and he'll be back next Sunday. But if I sub some, I might go through a few more things with you. But we're going to look at chapter 8. If you'd like to turn to chapter 8. Revelation chapter 8. Now I moved it and something happened. What happened? Oh, I forget the passcode. No, I've got to get back into it. It went off. Oh, it's asking the passcode. I love technology too. Okay. I'm sure it'll go off again, so just get ready for it. Okay, let's look at chapter 8. Let's read a few verses here. Chapter 8, verse 1. And when he had opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of a half an hour. And I saw the seven angels which stood before God, and to him that were given the seven trumpets. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given to him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire and cast it into the earth. And there were voices and thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. Now that's the end of the seventh seal. And then we began the seven trumpets, basically. And verse 6, And the seven angels which had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound. The first angel sounded, and there followed hail with fire mingled with blood. They were cast upon the earth, and the third part of the trees was burned up, and all green grass was burned up. And the second angel sounded as it were a great mountain burning with fire, cast into the sea. And the third part of the sea became blood. And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp. And it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters, because they were made bitter. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, as the third part of them were darkened. And the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. And behold, I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpets of the three angels which are yet to sound. Now, you're probably saying, why in the world would that be your favorite chapter? That would be the reaction, I guess, most people would give. But this chapter, I don't think is near as difficult as we make it. And I think it's one of the most important lessons in the book of Revelation. And so I guess that's why I begged Mark to let me have one more Sunday, because I enjoy this lesson. But it just sounds, when you read it, it just sounds like you have any idea what it's talking about. And if you'll go home and pull out books and read on the 8th chapter of Revelation, you'll find everything. Everything. I'm telling you, it'll be wide open. I want us to just look at the chapter a little bit today and see if we can make some sense out of it. First of all, we have to understand the different series that are used in Revelation. We have looked at the series of 7 seals. Okay, the 7 seals. And they dealt with things, physical events that were going to take place on this earth and are still taking place on this earth and will until Jesus comes again. And then we go to the 7 trumpets. Now, due to a lack of time, I guess, we'll just briefly work on this. But what you have is a different subject. The 7 seals dealt with one type of situation on this earth, and the 7 trumpets deal with an entirely different one. So that's why we get so confused in Revelation. We want to put everything in the same pot and let it boil, and that just doesn't work that way. Now, let's talk about the trumpets just a little bit. How was the trumpet? What would be the symbolic or the way the trumpet is used in the Bible? Anybody have any thoughts? I know you do. Okay, all right. I'm going to read Ezekiel, if I can get this started here. Ezekiel, you can be turning to it if you want to. I believe it's 33:3. 33:3. Okay. All right, this is talking about the watchmen, the people who are watching for the coming of enemies, the city of Jerusalem. And he says in verse 33:3 of Ezekiel, he says, if when he sees the sword come upon the land, he blow the trumpet and warn the people. So what was his job? Watch for the enemies. And when he saw the enemies coming, he was to sound the trumpet, sound the alarm. And then verse 34 and 35 are interesting that go with it. It says, then whoever heareth the sound of the trumpet and taketh not warning, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be on his own head. And in other words, if they blow the trumpet and I don't listen to it and somebody comes and gets me, it's my fault. And then verse 5 says, he that heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning, his blood shall be upon him, but he that taketh warning shall deliver his soul. So if you take the warning of the trumpet, you can deliver your soul. But if the watchmen see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take away any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity. The blood shall I require of the watchman's hand. So if the watchman doesn't blow the trumpet, whose fault is it? It's the watchman's fault if somebody comes and attacks the city, right? But if the watchman blows the trumpet and nobody pays attention to it, then it's their own fault. Now, what we have to do in Revelation is learn to understand and learn how that applies to what we're doing here. Now, we're in a series of 7 trumpets. Now, we've moved from 7 seals, and we're in a series of 7 trumpets. Now, what do trumpets do? They warn. They warn us. They announce something. They warn us. So we are not dealing with the events of the 7 seals. We're dealing with events of the 7 trumpets. Now, I guess the other thing, well, let's just, which way is the easiest to get through it? Verse 7 says, the first angel sounded, and there followed fire mingled with blood, and they were cast upon the earth, and the third part of the trees was burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. Boy, again, just go to your commentaries and just read that. Read it just for that verse. I mean, you'll find everything. But now look what's happening here. That angel is blowing a trumpet. That angel is warning us about something. Okay, what is it? Hail and fire mingled with blood. They were cast upon the earth. Now, obviously, hailstorms and fire and things, what does that symbolize? Okay, but it symbolizes problems and troubles that you'll have, right? I mean, if you're standing out in a hailstorm, you got trouble, right? Or if fire comes upon the earth, if your house burns, or, these are things that in the Bible are used to talk about all kinds of problems that we have. And it says, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood. Now, what would blood be? Death. Problems. Even, we talked about that in the 7 seals. The horses rode. The red horse was a horse that was of blood, and it would destroy people on this earth, lose their lives. And then it says it's cast upon the earth. Now, the key to it is, and the third part of the trees was burnt up. And all green grass was burnt up. This book is amazing in so many ways. If it weren't for a verse back in chapter 6 in the 7 trumpets. I don't think there'd be any way of understanding this verse. Chapter 6, verse 8 in the 7 trumpets says, "And I looked, and behold, a horse, and his name that sat upon him was Death, and hell followed him, and the power was given him over the 4th part of the earth." Now, what you have then here is a contrast between the seals and the trumpets. The seals dealt with the 4th part of the earth, and the trumpets deal with the 3rd. Now, maybe that's not making a lot of sense to you, but I asked you last week and maybe the week before, how many parts are there to a person's makeup? 2. How many lives do you have right now? You have a physical life and a spiritual life. Now, they're intertwined, but the physical actions affect your spiritual life and so forth and so on. But you have 2 lives. You have a physical life and you have a spiritual life. Now, some people in this world, I doubt, have much of a spiritual life. And that's some of the things that's talked about right here. Now, if you are going to let's go back to the number 3 and 4. The number 4 in Revelation represents what? Have you gotten that yet? Physical. Okay. The number 3 represents spiritual. Now, if you are going to denote a part of something, how would you do it mathematically? If you eat part of a pizza, you eat what? A fraction. Use a fraction. I eat the whole thing, but most people, I'm being honest, most people eat a smaller portion than that, and they call it a fraction. That's enough out of you. You go to the hallway. So if you're going to specify a certain part of a person, whether it be physical or spiritual, how could you do that? With a fraction and using the numbers 4 and 3. 1/4, the part of your physical or of your being, your total being, 1/4 of it would be which part? Physical part. 1/3 would be what part? Spiritual part. So when you read this, just substitute spiritual part for 1/3 and physical part for 1/4 in chapter 6, because it had power. The rider with the sword had power over the 4th part of the earth. He had power over the physical part, but could that soldier harm your soul? Could he? If you're faithful to God and some soldier rides up and whacks your head off, he's affected what part of your being? He's affected the physical part, but can he affect the spiritual part? Not with that sword. He cannot. And that's part of what we teach about a Christian life. And that God holds us in His hand. And nobody can take you out of that. No matter what they do to you. If you remain faithful to God, God will hold you in His hand. And you'll live with Him forever. Now, what we have then in the chapter 8 is a series of trumpets that warn about something. Now, sometimes in Revelation you can find definitions of one verse you're looking for in another one. And that, when you get familiar with a book, it becomes easy to do. But let's look at chapter 9, verse 4. And I don't want to try to interpret chapter 9, verse 4. I want you to just look at what it says and we'll make a determination about it. And it was commanded to them, that's talking about the locust that came out of the fire there. It says, they should not hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, but only those men which had not the seal of God in their foreheads. Now, look at the contrast. Look at the contrast. He said these locusts were not going to hurt. They're not going to hurt the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but only those men which had not the seal of God in their foreheads. Now, is the contrast between what these things or these locusts are going to hurt, is it between trees and people? It's not, is it? We know who those people are which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. So what is the contrast to that? Those who do have. And they are whom? Christians. And in verse 9:4, they are called what? Trees and grass. And green grass. Why green? All right. In contrast to the withered olive tree, or the withered fig tree that Jesus, when it withered, it was gone, it was dead, it wasn't living, was it? But as long as it's green, it's living. Okay, so what you have here then is a verse that says there's going to be hail and fire mingled with blood coming down upon the earth. And let's see, verse 7. Back over to chapter 6, verse 7. And they were cast into the earth, and the third part of the trees was burnt up, and the green grass. Now, what does this say? I'm warning you, the trumpet blowing. I'm warning you that the things, the trials, and the problems of this earth can cause what? Cause you to fall away from God. It is saying, it is warning you that the problems and trials and tribulations and things that affect our lives on this earth can cause what? It can cause you to lose your spiritual life also. It can lose your soul. So what's the warning? The warning is, I'm telling you, be cautious, be strong, because he says here that even the green trees, now what would be the contrast between trees and grass? Strong. Trees are strong. And it said it may even cause the strong to lose their souls, to lose their faith. And it says all green grass was burnt up. What does that mean? That if you're not strong, what's the probability that you're going to lose your faith and soul in the face of these trials? Even the strong can be destroyed, but the weak can really be destroyed, can't they? So he's saying, I'm warning you. I'm warning you. Now that is why I wanted to do this lesson, because this is a warning for us. Every one of us sitting right here today in these pews. That there are things that happen in this life that could cause us to lose our faith if we're not careful, if we don't heed the warning. What did the watchman do? He watched for the soul. He watched for the enemies coming. What do we do in our lives? We have to watch for the enemies that might attack our souls, right? All right, let's get off of that one. Let's go to the verse 8. Well, 1/3 tells you what part we're talking about. We're the trees and the grass. They're in the church. They're all strengths of faith in the church from weak to great. And he says that third part, talking about your soul, your spiritual life. You may lose your spiritual life if you succumb to these things that are going to attack you in this world. He's warning us, not telling us it's going to happen. The seals said these things are going to happen. The trumpets say, I'm warning you that these things could happen. Okay? Verse 8, and the second angel sounded, and there was a great mountain burning with fire cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. What part of the sea? Please. The third part, spiritual part of the sea. Now, sea represents what? Or whom? People of this earth. People of this earth. And the third part of the sea became blood. On that again is death, isn't it? But what does he say about it? There was a great mountain burning with fire. And boy, this is a good time to talk about this one, really. Let me read you a verse real quick to show you why I believe this is what it's talking about. I'm going to read Jeremiah 51:25. Isaiah 31:25. Now this is talking about Babylon. I'm sorry, Jeremiah. What did I say? Jeremiah is where I am. That's Jeremiah 51:25. This is talking about Babylon. And I just want you to watch the symbolism that he uses here about Babylon. He says, behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain, which saith the Lord, which destroyeth all the earth. And I will stretch out my hand upon thee and roll thee down from the rocks, and I will make thee a burnt mountain. What is a mountain? Governments, powers of this world. Babylon was the great mountain during the time of the Babylonian Empire. God made it a burnt mountain. In other words, what happened? He destroyed it. So he says, the second, and it was of a great mountain burning with fire cast into the sea. Do governments fall and affect the people of this earth? Do governments affect the people of this earth? Period. Absolutely. He says that there's going to be great mountains burning with fire cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood. In other words, those people on the earth, the sea of the masses of people on this earth, and they're going to be affected spiritually even because of the trials and things and the consequences of these governments falling. These governments are not going to last forever. They're at the mercy of God, I'll tell you that. And when these governments crash, or when they abuse the people, or when they do all kinds of horrific things to people of this earth, he says the people of the sea can lose their spiritual life. It can happen. You are being warned. That's the key. And the third part, verse 9, and the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life. Now, who would that be? If you were in the sea of the masses of this earth and have life, you have physical life, but you have also what kind of life? Spiritual life. And the third part of the creatures which were in the sea had life and died. In other words, you're being warned that the forces and the powers of this earth, don't trust in them. Who do you trust in? You trust in God, because those powers of men will fall and they will fail. And you're being warned not to let that affect your faith, your spiritual part. And it says, in the third part of the ships were destroyed. And I'm not sure exactly what that is, but I think, if anything, it probably talks about local churches. When Paul was shipwrecked, and they all started to get off in Acts like 27 over there somewhere, and they all started to get off the boat, what did Paul say? Except you remain in the ship, you will be lost. Now, I don't know that that is a perfect parallel with this verse, but about the ark, where do they have to be? In the ark. So some way it refers to a third part of the ships were destroyed. Even entire congregations or entire memberships of people can be destroyed by all these things that can happen on this earth. So remain faithful. And verse 10, in the third part of the angel there fell a great star from heaven, burning as the light of the lamp, and fell upon the third part of the rivers and the fountains of rivers of water. The name of the star is called wormwood, and the third part of the waters became wormwood. Many men died of the waters because they were made great. I don't have time to even start here, but I'll try to give you a little bit of quick. Wormwood's a bitter substance. Okay? And it says that I saw a great star fall from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, into the rivers and fountains of waters. What are the rivers and fountains of waters? God said in Jeremiah 17, I am the fountain of living waters. The Word of God. So when bitter waters fall upon the pure waters, what happens? What's the pure water of life? The Word of God. Bitter waters would be what? Polluted waters. Do we have any polluted waters in the world today? We have all kinds of polluted water, spiritual water in this world, don't we? And it says it's like a lamp, and you'll think it's the light, but what is it really? It's bitter water. There's an illustration, the perfect illustration for this is when the children of Israel came to Marah and they wanted to drink of the water, but the water was bitter. What did they do? They cut a tree down, put it in the water. Who's our tree? Jesus makes the waters pure. Third part of the creatures had life, and the third part of the ships. And the third angel, that's the wormwood. And the fourth angel, verse 12, the third part of the sun was smitten, the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars. So the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. What's in Revelation, in chapter 21 and 22, in the picture of the church, who is the light of the church? Christ, God. He is the light. He is our light. Will that light ever go out? It will never go out, but in the world today, who are the lights, and what is the light of the church on a human level? Those people who teach and preach the Word of God, right? They're giving light unto the church. And he says the third part of the sun may be smitten. Now, what's the third part? Spiritual part. If the spiritual part of the sun goes out, if there's spiritual darkness in this world, what's that going to cause? Error. People to lose their what lives? Spiritual lives. And so the sun and the moon, and those are talked about in the Old Testament as being the lights of the world. And it says the day shone not for a third part of it. That doesn't mean a physical day. It means a spiritual day. There may be times when the sun of spiritual light does not shine. And what happens to the people when that happens? They lose their spiritual lives. That light goes out. It shines not during the day nor during. Are there places in this world where that light's not shining today at all? That's right. It could be here if we're not careful. But if it happens, what are we supposed to do? We're responsible for ourselves, aren't we? And why are we responsible for ourselves? Because we have been warned. The watchman has warned us. It becomes our duties to remain faithful. That's why I like that lesson so well, is because it's talking about us. It's talking about our spiritual lives and its warning. It's one of the most important chapters in the book of Revelation because it gives the warnings to us why we need to remain faithful. All right, Mark will be with you next Sunday. If I have to sub for him along a little bit, there are a couple other. I'd like to talk to you about Armageddon some, and I'd like to talk to you about 1,000 years a little bit. We'll do that maybe another time. Thank you for all your attention you've given me and encouragement over the